All right, thank you all. So I'm here to talk about putting heads in headsets in the home. It's a goal that I've heard many times today. It's something that we are a big part of. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain who we are and what we do. I don't think our name is like an accurate descriptor. So I'm going to just jump in here. Why is prosthetics here on the stage, right? What do we do? So this is an article that we found from 1956, and this is back when we were first part of the system. Prosthetics and artificial limbs were kind of all centrally located in one office that did the research, the purchasing, the fitting, everything, right? At that point in time, our budget was $9.5 million all in. We were seeing 250,000 veterans. Since then, our role has grown. What we've done has expanded, and we've kind of branched off from our clinical counterparts who we're still co-located with. But we really do the purchasing of all medical equipment for veterans in the home, right? So the way I like to describe it is we're kind of like pharmacy for home medical equipment. We don't really have like a private sector counterpart, so that's like the shorthand, rough around the edges analogy I like to use. This pie chart, which is incredibly difficult to read, is only up there to sort of describe kind of like the scope and scale of what we do, right? So we buy things like home oxygen, sensory neural aids, so that's like eyeglasses, hearing aids, surgical implants, mobility devices. Of course, we still purchase artificial limbs, any sort of durable medical equipment we buy. And somewhere on this pie chart is at-home VR, which we are currently purchasing and issuing already, right? Not on the scale I think that we're all envisioning, but we're all working our way there together. And just for a sense of the size that we are today relative to our humble 1956 years, we actually see 55% of all veterans who are in the VA healthcare system get something from prosthetics. In fiscal 23, our budget was $4.3 billion. We bought 22.7 million distinct devices for 3.5 million veterans. Immersive technology, sort of where does that fit in with our overall picture of what we do in prosthetics and what we buy? Since COVID, right, we've seen this dramatic expansion, and we were already on a trajectory to get this, but immersive technology is part of this new sort of emerging tech wave of devices that's really expanding the ecosystem of what we provide to veterans and what we can do for them in the home, right? Wearable devices. I think Dr. Greenleaf really did a good job of like laying out sort of the current state of technology and what we're able to do. That raises one big question for us in prosthetics, and it's one that we've been asking and getting support from you all. How do we know that immersive technology is what's best for veterans, right? I think as we described today, we only have a certain number of interactions with veterans. We want to make sure that the dollars that we have to spend for veterans is being used in the way that's most effective to deliver their health care and help them achieve their treatment and rehabilitation goals. So we want to make sure that we're providing our clinicians with the tools that they have to confidently prescribe this equipment to veterans, knowing that they have a high likelihood of success and that we're going to be working together to achieve their goals. So this is kind of like a roadmap of the way we currently provide care for veterans. And it starts with the veteran, right? The veteran and their clinician at the evaluation. They're going to decide what the issue is that they want to treat. They're going to establish their goals, and if a device is needed, they're going to jointly decide together which device is required. At that point, the clinician is going to submit a prescription to prosthetics for that device, again, similar to pharmacy, right? Prosthetics in step 2 reviews the prescription, make sure that we have the authority to purchase whatever is being prescribed, and we go ahead and start that process. Part 3 is the fulfillment, right? So actually making sure that device gets bought and issued to the veteran as quickly as we possibly can. We will ensure that it's delivered, installed, and set up if necessary. Step 4 is a little bit different from that, right? It's sort of like the follow-up to make sure that the veteran is actually using it for its intended purpose. So we call that trading and fitting by shorthand. It's also, if there's any repairs that are needed to be done to the device, prosthetics will cover that. 5, this is where I really want us to focus in, because I think in the space of immersive technology, this kind of challenges a paradigm of the way clinicians interact with veterans, right? If we're talking about something like a power mobility device, maybe we'll have a follow-up with the veteran in a year. But if we don't hear from them, we can assume that it's working for them for what they need it for. But for something like VR, there really does need to be kind of some sort of continuous follow-up to make sure the veteran's using the device for the way we intended it, and that it's successful and not abandoned, right? Because then the veteran isn't receiving the health care that we identified as the goal to begin with. I'm a regulatory person, I'm a lawyer, and I did not want to go down the road of boring you all, but this is as simply put as I could possibly do it. This is kind of our regs in a nutshell. Prosthetics issued regulations a couple of years ago to really, for the first time, set a national standard for what it is that we can provide to veterans and how we'll provide it to veterans. The reg, I include a citation to the regs at the end, and I'll just neatly leave it at that. But there are 2 main questions that we need to make sure are answered. One, is the device something that we can purchase? The regulations identify 15 pretty broad categories of devices, items and services that we can issue. Some examples include home medical equipment, adaptive recreation equipment, mobility aids, cognitive devices, communication devices. I put all of those on there because I think immersive technology can fit into probably any one of those categories, or maybe multiple categories at once for a given veteran. They're not finite, right? They're broadly defined. Regs only come around once a generation or so. So it had to be kind of future-proof, and we had to have the ability to incorporate new technology into our regs. We did that on purpose. So without making you read all of those, I think we've got a lot of good options available, right, in the immersive tech space. The second is having a clinical standard. And it's that the prescribed device needs to serve as a direct and active component of the treatment or rehabilitation of the condition for which it's prescribed. That's a decision that the clinician makes, and that link, right, drawing that line from the device to the condition is something that the clinician does. Prosthetics does not review that qualitatively. We don't have the clinical expertise to be reviewing that, but we do need to ensure that it's present and there so that we have the authority to go ahead and buy the device and get it issued to the veteran. All right, so this slide, like earlier on, right, like the younger generation is the more tech savvy one. So my son he's 10 years old and is now like a PowerPoint expert. And he's like, this doesn't even have VR on it. So I had to say, but what if the person is wearing augmented reality and looking at these icons through the lens, right? This is, again, Dr. Greenleaf, I think, touched on this really well in his presentation. We can provide these things, right? We can identify for each of these wristbands that they're wearing, right, a distinct medical justification for each of them, right? A VA clinician can see a veteran, say, we need to monitor X, and write the prescription, and prosthetics will purchase it, right? That's the way our system is set up based on our 1956 roots, right? There's a problem, we prescribe what you need to fix it. But what that might end up with, if we don't design a system carefully from the beginning, is a veteran having way too much stuff, right? Veterans need simplicity. We want to deliver that for them. We want efficiency, a high, intuitive user interface, and something that they're likely to stick with, right? These are some of the challenges of this new technology. And that's the question that I pose kind of for everyone here, right? That's the challenge we're facing, is how do we build that together and get this question of should we answered with confidence, yes, right? These are, I think, now that we're out there in the real world and prescribing and issuing some of these things, 3 big challenges that I think we face in VA, and then I'll kind of focus on the prosthetics specific stake in each of these. First, the veteran experience, right? We need to center that when we're figuring out whether and which types of equipment to prescribe, purchase, and issue to the veteran. They'll do better if we have fewer, more familiar devices that the veteran is comfortable using and can be applied in a number of different clinical ways. The prosthetic stake in that is, as the purchaser of the equipment, we want to make sure that the veteran goes from that step 1, right, where they're being evaluated by their clinician, to receiving the equipment and the effective treatment that was intended to deliver as quickly as possible, and that they're able to use it throughout the intended lifespan of the device so that there's not any abandonment or any other issues that might inhibit them from receiving the treatment that they need. 2 is follow through. So these devices, not just immersive technology, but all of the emerging tech that, wearables and things like that, require a little bit more hands-on, at least in a different kind of way, right? We need to be checking in with the veteran and making sure that the equipment is being used on a regular basis for its intended purpose. Our stake in that is we're the ones who are going to be paying for repairs and replacements, right? So when we get the request in from a clinician to repair or replace a device, it would be very helpful for us to also know that it's because it's being used for that intended purpose, right? It's one thing to get a wheelchair where the wheels are worn down and we know the veteran is living their best life in that chair. It's another when we're not really sure, right, how it's being used and if the veteran is getting out of it what we all intended for them to. So we need to be creative in finding ways, especially supporting clinicians, to kind of do that follow-up with the veteran around that device. And then 3, maximizing device utility, right? So we want to make sure that we're delivering value with the dollars that we spend for veterans, and the way that I would define that is kind of making sure that there's maximum utility for the devices that are prescribed and issued. Can we make sure that the devices are versatile, that they can deliver all of the different pathways of treatment that we're exploring right now, right? We're not quite at a space where a headset's like a smartphone, where it has all the software applications we could possibly imagine on one piece of hardware. But are there ways that we can get there, that we can encourage that type of versatility? And how do we communicate that to our clinicians, right? In VA, we don't necessarily have a system where a clinician in one specialty has a lot of visibility over the suite of devices that have been issued to a veteran, but we need to get there, right? So that we are not inundating veterans with a number of separate devices that essentially perform the same thing, but have been independently prescribed and purchased by prosthetics. That's a lot. So I covered like a ton of content there. I want to make sure that we have the ability to sort of dialogue on this. So it would be great to get like some questions for us. As like the purchasers of stuff, I feel like maybe some of the vendors have some questions. I think, all right, yeah. So how are we going to get there? Work together, right? We have already seen this slide a couple times today, but I want to really hammer that point home. And there's a lot of stuff that's already happening, right? A lot of these, the VA Immersive team has really been a leader in sort of pulling groups within VA together, right? A year ago, you would not have seen prosthetics in the same room as VHA privacy and ethics, right? But we've been meeting regularly, and we're discussing these challenges and trying to, all these perspectives are needed, and we need to go through it all simultaneously to actually succeed. So we're already buying VR devices for veterans. They're out there in the world. We need to be checking in with them, making sure that they're working and meeting their needs, and then backing that up with data, right? That's what we need to sort of demonstrate that the successful delivery of healthcare to veterans is making sure that we put their experience first and sort of do the long division to sort of demonstrate our success. The internal work, right? For those of you who are here from VA, thank you. We are, even today, I'm like making brand new connections in spaces where we're trying to expand our work, think creatively, and advance our mission, right, to deliver healthcare to veterans. It's happening with, well, yeah, I guess I've already talked about everybody, and a lot of my counterparts have spoken today, which is really nice. Last is intergovernmental communication, right? This is something that we're working on in prosthetics in new and exciting ways. Working with our partners like in FDA to improve, right, the way that we review and clear medical devices. Some of the work groups that we're a part of in VA, and there's more that, like, there's some that I learned about today, I didn't even know existed, but in cybersecurity, in improving health equity, we're part of a group with FDA on that. Designing clinical studies. So FDA is often, you know, like when a device receives FDA clearance to be marketed, that clinical study that was used to demonstrate safety might be the only study that's out there on that device for quite some time. So there are opportunities for VA and other payers to sort of inform that study at sort of the design phase. And I think we'll be rolling that out, I think, in the next year, sort of that partnership. And that is all I have to tell you. So I hope to hear back from some of you.